Unfortunately, we did not write that. Um, but we love singing it. So I'm going to start this morning. I wanted to read this to everyone. So there was a coach, and he had been working with a group of children using basketball to help them develop self confidence. The children loved coming to his class, where they were learning how to overcome their fears and limitations. All of them had improved in their skills except for one little boy who remained withdrawn and unable to shoot a basket. In the gymnasium where they practiced, the front row was an impressive stretch of plush red velvet seats, which were reserved for VIPs. The coach had been told by his boss not to let the children use these seats so as to keep them pristine for the very important people. But seeing how hard the kids had worked and how much they had achieved, the coach said to them at their last class, "If you can make a basket, then you can sit in one of those red velvet seats." No sooner had he said this than he realized he made a terrible mistake. That little withdrawn boy would not be able to make a basket, and he would feel even more alienated from the others. One by one, each child went to the free throw line, and one by one, they each made a basket. Bursting with happiness, they took a seat in one of those fancy chairs. Finally, it was the turn of the special child. He tried several times, and he failed. Then the coach took the ball from him, and he said, "Now close your eyes." And he said, "Now see yourself making a basket." After a short time, the coach asked the little boy, "Did you make it?" And the little boy said, "No." He said, "Try again." And the coach encouraged him. He said, "Envision it and see it." He said, "Did you make it now?" And the little boy still said no. And after repeating this several more times, he was finally able to say with amazement, "I made it! I made it!" Only then did the coach hand him the ball, and for the first time in his young life, the boy made a basket. The whole class cheered jubilantly for him, and he took his place in one of the special seats, truly a VIP. If you can see it, you can do it. Spirit, I thank you today for this opportunity to be a vessel. Thank you for an opportunity for us to simply be, to be in your presence, to hear the message of your heart, which is the beating of our heart, and to truly walk out of this space today knowing that if we can see it, we can be it. Now, how many here consider themselves dreamers? Anyone consider yourself a dreamer? Visionary dreamer? I know there's a lot of us out there. Now, how many of you are married to a dreamer? We'll pray for you. Dreaming is something that I've done since I was a little boy. I've had visions. I've always had a special connection to spirit. And, growing up, I didn't quite understand it. But I would see things, and I would just think, well, I guess this is going to happen in my future. I used to write in journals, and I would, just basically envision. I didn't at the time. It was kind of like a vision board, but it was mostly in writing, not in pictures. But I would see the pictures in my mind. And so growing up, and I was raised in the church. I was raised in a very traditional church, the Pentecostal. My parents were actually United Methodist, and then we moved on the eastern shore of Maryland, and we started going to a Pentecostal church. And, it was a really fun experience. The music was amazing in the Pentecostal church, and Sundays were never boring. I mean, people were running the aisles, jumping pews, and, it was a little cray-cray. But we weren't bored, so we enjoyed it. We're like, "Whoa, this is fun," and then that drummer would get going with the dun, 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 and the bass player dun, 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 dun. And we're like, "Oh Lord, the Holy Spirit's about to show up," and so, but it was also being raised in the church and in a traditional church was not necessarily easy because here I was, this teenager And here I was internally struggling with being gay and coming to terms with my own sexuality, which Reverend Cherie did want me to say Happy Pride. And so I thought, how appropriate. Of course, she planned it this way to have two gay men on Pride Month to come and speak at her church. The universe works it all out. But, coming to terms with my own sexuality at that age in a church that was extremely homophobic and extremely against it, I joke because I had a terrible acne problem growing up, but it was really just on my forehead. And anything that I could get when I was as a teen, going to school and everything, I would get all the Oxy, the pads and all this stuff. What I've now realized, I really never had an acne problem. It's that I went up to be anointed with oil so much to be healed and delivered. I was constantly being anointed because I thought I needed to be delivered. And I'm like, I didn't have acne. Bless my heart. They just I was always being anointed for prayer, to pray and, pray the gay away that I had acne. So anyway, that was a funny realization as I've gotten older. But I went up for prayer so many times, and I wanted God to take this from me. I felt I had this calling, and I wanted to minister. I wanted to tell people the good news. I wanted people to know how much they were loved and how much that God had a plan for their life. And all of a sudden, here I am coming into my teens realizing, oh, wait a second. How am I going to do this when I have this issue that my church is telling me I'm an abomination? And so coming into that awareness was extremely difficult. And, as many LGBT young people do, I overachieved in everything else. I became the straight A student. I was in church every time you could be in church with the youth group and, going up to the altar and praying because I knew that my love for God was so real. And I knew that my desire to do whatever I came to this earth to do was so authentic that I just thought, how could this be happening to me? And so I graduated high school. I went to a Pentecostal-based college in Tennessee. It's called Lee University. It's a liberal arts school. It was very big with music, but it was Pentecostal-based. So then not only did I, go through that through my teens, but then in my late teens and early 20s, here I am in a college that's telling me the same story, that I'm an abomination and that this and that I can be delivered and I can be healed. And so it really wasn't until I graduated college, and the long and short story is that I actually did go in and I was traveling with a contemporary Christian band. We were traveling, it was a group of 4 of us, and I was in such turmoil during this time of my life of trying to reconcile who I am versus who God was calling me to be. And I came out to the band literally on the bus. We were on a bus on the way to make a great country song because we were on the way to Chattanooga to sing in a concert. And I came out on the bus to the band, and they suddenly looked at me like I was a stranger, as a completely different person. They said, "How can he sing with us tonight on stage?" And I said, "Guys, I've been singing with you for a year every night on stage. I'm no different. I need to tell you this because I was really at a place in my life where I didn't know if I could continue and go on." And so sadly, the one place I came out with these guys who I thought were my brothers was the one place I was rejected the most. I literally got to the church that we were supposed to sing at that evening, and I walked in and asked the minister if I could get a ride to the airport, that there had been an emergency. And that was the last time I ever saw the band. No one reached out after that, and it was an aha moment for me because I realized that the one place that many of us should feel the safest to come out in whatever issues that we're facing is sometimes the places that we're condemned and rejected the most. And it takes me back to the stories. If we look in the stories of the Bible and we look at the stories of Mary Magdalene and Jesus saying, who have not sinned, cast the first stone. And we look all throughout the history and the ones that have been oppressed and have been the persecuted. We see that it's a process of coming to a new space and a new place of consciousness, and ultimately coming to a place of self-love. And it took me many years to get to that place. I remember shortly after coming out, I ended up homeless. My parents did not know any of this was going on, and so I didn't want them to know, and I didn't want to have to come out to them. And so there was about 4 months that I experienced homelessness, and then a lovely husband and wife took me in, and they essentially gave me an opportunity to work for them, and in lieu of working, they gave me a free place to live. And that's really, I say they saved my life, because if they hadn't come into my life at the time they did, I really don't know what path I would have taken. But all of that led to an experience of me being able to truly begin searching why I believed what I believe. And what I realize is most of what I believed at that point in my life, it's because it's what I had just been taught. You know, it's what I had been taught over the years. It was the Sunday school lessons I had learned. It was all the preaching I had heard. And when I finally got to a place of really just being so raw and so broken, it was really an opportunity for me to just have that earnest prayer. And I said, God, reveal yourself to me. Reveal yourself to me. And I was even at a place of, I thought, well, maybe it's like a priest. Maybe this is something in my life that I'm supposed to sacrifice and I'm supposed to abstain from. And, it's a cross to carry. I was so open to whatever that God's plan was for me. And I was given the book, Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. And I read that book, and that book really changed my life. Because I started realizing, and I wasn't just reading that book, I was reading a lot of books at the time. And what started happening is I started remembering. I started remembering who I am. And I started remembering that this isn't just something that happened to me. I started remembering my soul. I started remembering I'm not a victim in this. My soul chose this experience to come and learn what it's here to learn. My soul chose this experience so that I could come and maybe help others. My parents are here today. They flew in from Tennessee. My dad hasn't flown for years, and they're here today, so you can wave, Mom and Dad. But it's been a long journey, and I don't want to focus, it's easy to focus on the past, but I do feel it's important to share how I've gotten to where I am and how we've gotten to where we are. Life has taken so many twists and turns throughout the process. Coming out to Mom and Dad was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. What I will say is they've loved me the entire journey. They didn't always agree with me the entire journey, and their journey, it's been interesting for me watching their journey. I will say a lot of us that come out to our parents, we have to understand it took us so many years to come out to ourselves. We can't expect our parents to just in a moment say, oh, okay, we love you just as you are. It's okay. Well, we actually can expect them to say that, but we don't necessarily have to expect them to just understand who we are. And wait a second, how did this happen? When did this happen? Parents have their own process to go through of accepting. And of course, the first thing a lot of them do is it our fault? What did we do wrong? I'm like, everything's your fault. No, I'm kidding. Don't we say that about our parents? Everything is their fault. But we've had such a beautiful journey, and as difficult as it was in the beginning, they have become two of our biggest advocates. And once Demarco and I met, I'm going to fast forward, because after coming out, after becoming homeless, after getting back on my feet, I did move to Los Angeles, and I moved there because I thought, well, I may not have a career in Christian music, but I thought maybe the pop industry is open-minded enough to accept, and this is back in the early in 2001, so this is still 20 years ago. And so moved to Los Angeles, began, ironically, churches started hearing my story and started having me come and sing. And I thought I was moving to LA to do pop, and now all of these churches are asking me to come share my testimony and sing. And so little did I know, again, another plan, all these churches started inviting me to sing, and I ended up with a ministry in affirming churches, and especially in unity churches. My work with Marian, I actually read her book, and then this is the power of manifestation. I read her book. A couple months after I read her book, her personal assistant called me, and he said, I've heard your story. I'm writing a book. I would love to interview you for my book. So I ended up meeting her personal assistant, and then she asked me to travel and sing with her for that year. And so I just was connecting the dots and following the breadcrumbs. And I'm like, okay, God, I said here I am. Show me. I'm going to keep walking. And it was really through touring with Marianne Williamson that really introduced me to the New Thought message and to Unity's message. She, at the time, was the minister of Renaissance Unity in Detroit, Michigan. And so once I started opening up, I say the biggest thing I ever did was coming out was my sexuality, but then the next biggest thing was coming out spiritually. And, realizing that Christianity and the Christianity that I grew up in was not necessarily spirituality. And people often ask me, well, what's the difference between religion and spirituality? And I always like to say, I feel religion, it really divides us. Religion is you're this, or I'm this and you're that. Whereas spirituality is we're all in this together, regardless of what our differences are, regardless if we believe this. Religion is you're Methodist, you're Lutheran, you're Catholic, it's all these things these labels that divide us with these different dogmas. Whereas spirituality is we believe what we believe and it's all good because it's all one. And once I started opening up to that truth, then my life just started expanding. And I started seeing miracles happen one by one. And I could go through the journey of that. We don't have time this morning for me to do that. But what I will say is the entire time through this experience is that I never gave up on the dream. I never gave up on the dream. From the time I was young, I always believed that, number one, I was going to somehow be involved in music. Number two, it was going to somehow be in ministry, reminding people of God's love. Number three, I always saw property. I always felt like I was going to have land with different homes on it and that it was going to be a place of healing. I always saw an opportunity to help children, not necessarily LGBT kids, but I always knew that I was going to in some way have a work that would help kids. So all of that has manifested, and it's manifested even more beautifully than I imagined. It's not necessarily the way I imagined it, but it's all manifested. And when I moved to Los Angeles, I met Demarco. I had only lived there a few months. He was also a musician and sang, and so he started traveling with me to some of my church gigs. And before we knew it, we were Jason and Demarco. And 10 years later, before we knew it, we had been touring for 10 years, traveling to churches all over the country and even over the world. And the one thing through our work and our ministry was just letting go and letting God and saying, we are here. We will continue sharing the message as long as the door's open for us to share it. And so in that process of sharing and touring for 10 years, we got to a place after 10 years where we were just really tired of living out of suitcases and living on airplanes and on buses. And so at that point is when we decided to move from Los Angeles to Tennessee. And we also, instead of, I guess a lot of couples kind of when they get to that point, they adopt or get a pet. And, we just jumped straight to kids. We're like, we love dogs, but, let's have babies. And so in 2011, Demarco and I had our boys through surrogacy. And that was really a shift for us in our life because it really rooted us. We had been traveling for over a decade together, and once we had the boys, it really rooted us. And at that point, a Unity church in Houston, it was Unity Houston, under Reverend Howard Caesar, we actually went and ministered there just in a concert, and afterwards they came to us and they said, would you all be interested in actually working here? They were really trying to get their young adult and youth ministry up and moving. And they said, we love your music, we love your style of music, if you guys would be interested in coming here, we would love to have you. And so it was just a natural progression for us that gave us a place to root ourselves, it gave us a community to really root in, and that just so happens to be where we met our surrogate, she was the youth and family director at the church. And so she came into our life, and then we ended up having the boys a year later. After our contract was up at Unity of Houston, we ended up moving to Tennessee. Mom and Dad had retired to Gatlinburg, Tennessee. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. But we knew we didn't want to live in Gatlinburg, but Nashville was a no-brainer because of the music industry. And so we moved to Nashville in 2013, and we've been there ever since. Last year, I started getting a little, when you get those little spirit moments where you're like, uh-oh. You're like, I'm feeling something. I'm feeling like a little nudge to do this, and it's a little outside of your comfort zone. But I started getting a little nudge, and I started looking at real estate. And I kept feeling, I was like, well, the Northeast, logically, the Northeast would make sense because that's where Demarco's family is in Toronto, and my family's in Maryland. So I started looking in the Northeast, and I kept looking, almost an obsession. I mean, DeMarco's like, would you get off the phone? Because I was on Realtor.com just looking. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like there's something, like an urgency that I feel there's something we're supposed to be looking for. I didn't know exactly what, but I just had a sense. And so I kept looking in the Northeast, and then one day I just felt like, look in the Northwest. And so I went to the Realtor.com map. I clicked on a few properties, and this big red barn pops up on Realtor.com, and I just thought, ooh. And so I start looking at the pictures, and I let DeMarco see it. I'm like, and I had let him see a lot of properties, and usually he just was like, mm-hmm, and then hand it back to me. But this one, he went, and he started scrolling, and I'm like, I got a out of him. And so he scrolls through it, and I could tell he felt a little something, something. And so we flew out here, and in Nevada City was this property, and we flew out and we looked at it, and we both thought we feel crazy, but we feel like we're supposed to do this. And so in March, it's been a year. It was March of last year of 2022. We actually closed on this property out in Nevada City. And again, we're just saying, okay, God, okay, we're following the breadcrumbs. And it essentially is a second location. Our property in Nashville, all those years of dreaming and of envisioning a property, it manifested. We have a 25-acre ranch in Nashville with 3 homes on it. We do Airbnb overnight lodging. We do farm-to-table dinners and retreats, weddings. And so it has been a beautiful space of healing. And then on the nonprofit side, we did launch a nonprofit, and it serves foster youth and foster families. We actually opened our nonprofit for homeless youth because of my own background with homelessness. I really wanted to have a nonprofit that served the homeless youth community. But what we realized when we opened the drop-in center is that the majority of these kids attributed being homeless to aging out of foster care. So a lot of them turn 18, they have never been adopted, they have to leave the system, and they have nowhere to go. And so what we've been doing in Tennessee is essentially we've created camps for these foster teens where they start learning and discussing what it means to age out and their benefits and resources available to them. We also do free birthday parties for foster kids. A lot of these kids have never even been celebrated. They don't even know what a birthday is. And so to see these kids come and have this moment where they are celebrated and their life is celebrated, it's a really beautiful experience. And then we do a big Easter egg hunt and prepare Easter baskets for foster kids as well. And so we're not really sure what's happening out here other than we know that we've bought this second location and we've launched a second Gratitude Ranch. That's the name of our ranch, Gratitude, like a dude ranch. And so it's Gratitude Ranch, Nevada City, and it's the same concept. It's overnight accommodations. It's a really beautiful space for retreats and for events. And so our plan right now is to be out here over the summers, and then while the boys are in school, we'll be in Tennessee during the year for them to be in school. And then we hope to be out here in holidays and some special occasions as well. And so I say all of this because this little boy right here, I could never make a basket. I could never make a basket. I tried playing sports. My dad was a PE teacher, and he is an amazing athlete. And no matter what I did, I didn't do it. I didn't throw the basketball right. I didn't throw the baseball right. I ran funny. And I just realized I'm not meant to make a basket in basketball. But there's a lot of other ways I can make baskets. And that's the joy and the gift of life, is no matter what you think you can't do, if you can see it, you can do it. Can we say that together? If I can see it, let's say I. If I can see it, I can do it. And that's the message for this morning. This little boy who couldn't make a basket, this little boy who ended up homeless, now has multiple properties, is a real estate broker, went into real estate 10 years ago, have had a wonderful career in it, have extremely blessed. You know, it's so nice to be able to go to churches now. We used to, for 10 years, we went to churches and we lived on love offerings and CD sales. And I thought, it's so wonderful to be able to go to churches and whatever you can give us, give us. It's so wonderful to not have to rely on, to be able to do ministry and not have it be income. You know, to be able to just go share the good news and share God. Not that there's anything wrong with income from ministry, but, you know, for 10 years we relied on it, and it was stressful. And, you know, God opened up a way for me with real estate. God's opened up a way with us with our properties and our rental income and our event income. And I just look and I stand amazed, and I don't say it out of ego at all. I truly, this isn't about look what we've done and look what God's given us. This is really looking at that little boy. I look at that little boy who all he wanted was to love God. All he wanted was to serve God. And all he really wanted was for others to really experience and understand how much God loves them. Because God loves us so much in this life that we've been given, this opportunity that we've been given to walk this journey. You know, I believe our souls have chosen the journey that we're walking. And I know that's sometimes so hard to hear for some people, especially when you're walking a journey that is not an easy one. When you're walking a journey and there's suffering, when you're walking a journey and there's pain, when you're walking a journey and there's loss, it's so hard to think, how in the world did my soul ever choose this? My soul is crazy. But you know, I believe that there is an orchestrated, bigger picture happening for each and every one of us. And my hope today is that we step into that path knowing that we also have the power to shift that reality, to change that reality. And my dad is a living example. You know, my dad being an athlete, I remember when my dad was diagnosed with colon cancer 5 years ago, and it's a miracle he's sitting here right now. But I remember when he came out of his surgery, because I know my dad, and my dad is a competitive athlete. And I said, Dad, you got to look at cancer like it's the other team. You look at cancer like it's the other team, and you're going to beat it. And my dad always wins. We hated playing board games with my dad growing up. He just wins. He wins everything. And I'm like, you're going to win. You're going to beat this. And here we are 5 years later, and it really is miraculous that number one, it's miraculous he came to California, because he wasn't real excited about us buying out here. It's too far. And so for each and every one of us this morning, and I know I've kind of been all over the place, but for each and every one of us, I hope we can leave today knowing to never give up on your dreams, knowing that miracles still happen, and they are alive and well. And knowing that whatever path you've chosen, you're not alone. Knowing that whatever path you've chosen, that through the power of our minds, through the power of our consciousness, through the powers of our prayers, we can shift the dream. We can shift the reality, and we can walk out of these doors more peacefully, more powerful, more in alignment, more in tune, and hopefully more in love than we walked in. And so it is. Amen. This is a song that I wrote in college when I was going through a lot of what I was going through, and so we wanted to share it with you this morning.